If you missed it live, catch the podcast on kaya959.co.za.
Thank you so much, sir. Oh, always a delight to speak to you. I guess first things first, when we look at 2024, right now it's really a blank canvas. And typically in previous election years, many analysts and commentators have been able to call it out and I guess predict a certain level of clarity. But when you look at it now, especially given the observations of the local government environment, provincial government and legislature, and even national, how critical is this year for, I guess, just the success and the continuation of the progress that we need to see in our cities and municipalities?
Yeah, I think many, and I'll follow the lead from the many economists who are talking about this year as being the watershed year. And indeed, it's a watershed year because we have seen a change in so many of the dynamics that we have come to be accustomed to. Case in point is the fact that, as you pointed out, at the ballot, when we go and vote, you would almost know how the outcome is going to be. Right now, we can take a lead from the fact that we've seen coalitions from municipalities that have sprung up. Are we likely to see the similar coalitions coming up in the way that, they've been playing themselves? Are we going to see stability or instability? But I think the big issues that we need to be looking at is how that influences government policy in its totality. And government policy starting from the national level, we know that there are some bills that were running through Parliament and apparently being rushed, such as your NHI, such as your social relief grants and all of that. And all of those have a particular impact on the economy. So hence the link, I think, when you're opening in terms of the political economy that, we are living under, depends certainly on who is going to be in charge and how the policies are going to be drafted, or even those that are there to be implemented in a proper way. But we still also have that responsibility to look at, which ones are the bad policies that the country should not be following, so that we can at least have a local economy that can be vibrant.
And maybe we'll touch on some of those policies in just a moment, Miyelani, but I'm intrigued. When we look at the headlines that we see, we hear of the Auditor General's reports around the concerns of billions lost through accounting and financial malfeasance. We hear of businesses saying that municipalities need to be fixed because services just aren't being delivered adequately. And of course, how this does speak to the detriment of the quality of life that many of us experience in municipalities that are distressed and dysfunctional. And this is really key to your work, right? I guess even the last time we spoke, you highlighted the grave concerns that exist around the quality of operational efficiency of our cities. So as the status quo stands at the moment, what does it tell us about not only the government of the day, but how it interacts with the business of the day in order to create a workable environment?
I think what we are seeing is a golden thread that runs throughout government. And I think government, we must not think when national government is running efficiently or properly, and provincial government is managing to deliver on its mandate and local government is faltering. We think, that government is working. Government is exactly those three spheres. Mm-hmm. So the key issues is what the Auditor General brings out, annually with regards to the feedback of how the finances are being managed. You can draw a line back into how the economic management of the country is being done. We can cite, other institutions that are strong, that are doing their bit to manage the economy properly. But by and large, if you go back to the issue of the economic management across government, I think it's one message that permeates into how the finances are also being managed, and how the finances are being managed also has an impact in terms of the running and the operational service delivery within those particular municipalities. So the key issue here is that as the AG pronounces all the time, it goes back again into how the rest of government is managing or not managing, for that matter, the economy in a way that it should be running. And the local economy tends to suffer even more because the local economy is deficient of the skills that are supposed to be driving the various programs to stimulate, to attract investment, as well as grow investment within the local economy. So that's in fact, if I juxtapose that with the policy issues, economic management, as well as how the service delivery pans out, that is certainly intertwined and interlinked. And if it's not that, the policies are not implemented properly, as well as the management of the economy is not done according to how the growth can be stimulated, we end up with issues of the local economy also suffering.
100%. What we've also discussed in previous years, and even through the last municipal elections or local government elections, Miyelani, was again the quagmire that is coalition governments. And I refer to it in that manner because it's rather unfortunate that as we take a look at the various provinces and municipalities in South Africa, we can only allude to negative examples as to the difficulties and intricacies of coalition governments. If we see such failures at a local government level, are there any learnings or lessons that we ultimately need to prepare for should this unfold at a provincial and national level?
I think the issue and the key issue which we are seeing is that the fact that we have coalition governments across, municipalities or governance points to the fact that, we don't have one common policy that, we're managing the country according to. If you look at the National Development Plan, is there something that cascades, for instance, into the provinces and is aligned to how the districts as well as the municipalities are panning out? So the issue here is that coalition governments, in theory, should not necessarily be a bad thing. However, if there's no common script that is being followed across the board, where we're following a 20 to 30 year plan according to the country, and not being susceptible to the chops and changes with regards to who is in power and who is driving the agenda of the day. We see that a lot, with regards to the manifestos that, come through from the various political parties, which are not aligning back into where the country should be. Each one has got their own way of looking at how to drive and manage the economy. So the issue of coalitions, yes, will continue to be a topic in this year, and it will even become a new topic with the provincial as well as the national governments. And I guess that, the kind of volatility that we have seen at the local level in some ways will and could translate into how the rest of the economy is being managed. Then we are in trouble if we are getting into that space where we are not managing the economy according to a set, principles. And based on a consistent, policies that we are implementing.
I'm glad you mentioned this, Miyelani, because it does speak to what it is that we should avoid. But I can imagine in your work as an advisor, chief advisor at Ntiyiso Consulting, you also work on positive solutions, right, that need to be implemented, that need to be prioritized in order to see a level of success within South Africa's local governments. And are there some solutions that you've witnessed that can probably be implemented in the short to medium term to ensure that we return to this level of economic growth that is desired?
Definitely. And I think that's, if we get now into the solutions, is that if you look at, the sunset, economy, the coal, in terms of, the mining industry, the industries that are declining in many of the towns which used to be vibrant, and also juxtaposing that with the fact that, we have now the age of renewables, which is, for us, the sunrise, economy. Those are the policies which we believe at a local level, municipalities need to be armed with the skills as well as the capital to be able to drive the new forms of energy provision, to manage the just transition as well. So the issues around economic development as well is around getting the municipalities to drive those bread and butter issues. At this point in time, the agricultural side or the agribusiness is not a big issue at a local level, and it should be, because that is how you stimulate the economy as well as food security and create jobs at a local level with those economies. The next issue is perhaps a contentious one, which says we sit with pension funds which are worth trillions of rands, which are not being released into the economy to go and build critical infrastructure, or at least to direct particular programs that are going to help even the local economies to be able to navigate through the difficulties. And perhaps, that is those are some of the areas which we would be looking at as solutions to look at, capital on the one side, and on the other side to then support, the new industries that are coming up. The other aspect as well is entrepreneurship is an area which is spoken about quite often, but even when the budget is allocated, you don't get a sense that there's a lot that is being allocated into driving entrepreneurship, especially at the grassroots level. So in terms of the solutions, we look at the sunrise economy, we look at, the sources of capital that are there, we look at, getting ordinary South Africans to be able to drive, the economy themselves with starting their own businesses and being supported, very strongly with regards. So this is perhaps, some of the aspects that or things that ought to be looked at in this year to drive the change in the current economic landscape.
100%. I'm glad you mentioned that, Miyelani, because it also speaks to the role and responsibilities of all key players in the stakeholder groups. And I'm keen to also talk about business. So often when it comes to elections, business, I guess, often shies away and just says, well, government needs to do this. But is there anything that we can actually call on business to actively do to be part of the solution?
Well, business plays a key role. And I think, business as well is part of that community that sits with quite a sizable balance sheet, which at times they are holding back because of the economic climate, which is not favorable for them. So business also needs to jump forward. And in this case, whether it's in partnership with government, we've been hearing that the president meets quite often with business. But in this case, it ends up with, large businesses. So large businesses also need to pull in the medium, the small businesses, as well as the cooperatives and the rest of the business people within the economy, because business as well has a positive role in terms of, bringing in new solutions, implementing new programs. Why shouldn't government in this year 2024 emphasize more the public-private partnerships in terms of rolling out, healthcare, in terms of rolling out energy, in terms of rolling out, the road infrastructure, and the many other areas where there's a dire need. We know that Transnet is almost on its knees, and that is where business also needs to come in, because they rely on the logistics backbone. On the energy side, there are some efforts, but are they adequate efforts to be able to drive, the growth? So the role of business in this case, we've seen that, business has kind of, as you've said, taken a backseat. However, I think this is where business needs to take a leadership role beyond, the conversations that happen in the higher echelons, and physically seek out, entrepreneurs, businesses. The banks, for instance, sit with a number of accounts which belong to small businesses. And the question is, how are they and what are they doing to help these small businesses to be able to access, funding, to access, markets, to access, knowledge and all of that. So business and as a whole and across the various sectors, I think ought to play a more of an active role, and even bypassing some of, the red tape which has been set up, or at least exists, from a government point of view, because there's also an issue of cutting the red tape, which the president has a team looking into that. But business knows exactly where the red tape is and should be taking a more active role with regards to cutting that particular red tape, but also supporting more the smaller and medium enterprises that they are banking, for instance, from a banking sector.
100%. If I'm hearing you correctly, Miyelani, I guess to each and every one of us as citizens, this essentially means we cannot ignore not going to the polls this year. In other words, your vote will literally be your voice that has an influence on the quality of life that you experience in South Africa.
I think, if I may add, to that, this is 1 year as a watershed year that everyone needs to be vigilant in the way and come out and exercise, your vote, because really, I think, the situation that we are in, and some are already experiencing some despair, or at least showing signs of despair. This is not the year that, we should be taking a backseat. So we need to be more active in terms of, the various areas, whether it's as well, the artistic fields, so the different sectors of the economy really need to show up and drive, the everyone to the polls, but also to drive the solutions that are going to take, South Africa forward and take and to move us away from this single-digit growth that we've experienced for so long now.
100%. Always a pleasure speaking to you, Mr. Holeni. Truly appreciate the insight you've given us this evening and, reminded us of the fundamentals that do have an influence on business, on our livelihoods, on our employability and quality of life that we experience. Thank you so much for your time again, sir.
If you missed it live, catch the podcast on kaya959.co.za.